All right, we are going to get started. Welcome. My name is Katie Burton. I am the Director of Education and Interpretation at Keeler Tavern Museum and History Center in Ridgefield. And I have with me our partner, representative of our partner, Andy Forsyth from Ridgefield Library. And this is part of our Declaration Deep Dive. Ridgefield Library and Keeler Tavern Museum have been for the last almost 6 months now doing a series of programs that are commemorating America 250. We have two different threads. We have Declaration Deep Dive, where we bring in scholars to talk about the Declaration and its impacts. And then we have our America 250 community conversations that are discussion based for folks to come and talk about the Declaration, what it says, what people said to it, without any pressure to know a lot of stuff, but just to react and have good conversation. And so tonight, very excited to start off the next in our Declaration Deep Dive series. Before I introduce our speaker for tonight, I will just give a shout out to our next program, which is going to be very soon. It's going to be Tuesday, December 9th, so next week, 7 p.m. at the library. That's our next community conversation. And that's a follow-up. Our first very successful community conversation was just looking at what the Declaration actually says. And for the second one, we're going to be looking at what people say about the Declaration of Independence. Influential figures, both contemporary with the document all the way up through today. What do people say? How do they remember it? How does what people say about the Declaration shape our idea of the document and our sense of national identity? So please join Andy and I there. That promises to be another good conversation. So tonight, I am pleased to welcome Matthew Skic from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. They are, as you might imagine, also doing a lot of work around commemorating America 250. And he, as the Director of Collections and Exhibitions, is in charge of a new exhibit that he's going to be talking about with us tonight, The Declaration's Journey. Matthew joined the museum staff in 2016 after graduating from the Winterthur program in American Material Culture at the University of Delaware. Since the museum opened in 2017, he's curated multiple award-winning exhibitions there, including Cost of Revolution, The Life and Death of an Irish Soldier, and Black Founders, the Fortin Family of Philadelphia. We also just found out that we have Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in common as a place that is special to us. So that was wonderful. And so what we'll do tonight, I'm going to hand things off to Matthew. He'll have his presentation. We will have time at the end for some Q&A. I would ask that if anybody has any questions, you put them in the chat. And then we can pick them up again at the end of the presentation. All right, so Matthew, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie and Andy, for hosting me this evening. And it's so wonderful to be speaking to you all in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and elsewhere, wherever you're tuning in from. And thank you for that kind introduction. And yes, the 250th, 2026 is something we have been thinking about on a daily basis for quite a while now. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a deep dive to go in that program theme into our exhibit about the Declaration's journey that just opened up in October. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll dive right in. Let's see. So we're going to do. Okay. All right. So as the Museum of the American Revolution is not quite 10 years old yet. The museum opened its doors to the public on April 19th, 2017. And that means the museum has had the 250th on our radar and on our long-range thinking for really since we opened. We knew we were going to be opening less than 10 years away from 2026. And so the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which was adopted 2 blocks away from where the museum's front door is, at Independence Hall, we knew that was going to be a major point in the museum's early history. And the Museum of the American Revolution, for those of you that have been before, you know this, but those of you that haven't been yet, I encourage you to come. But we have built a reputation for immersive, dynamic exhibitions, notably our core exhibition on the second floor of the museum, which is at the heart of the museum's offerings. But we also have put on and developed in-house a special exhibit slate that has won awards and dug deeper into some of the stories that we only scratched the surface of in our core exhibition. I'm showing on screen some shots from the museum's core exhibit. And one of the most signature items in the museum's collection, perhaps the most signature item, is George Washington's headquarters tent from the Revolutionary War. This is what a lot of people come to see when they come to the Museum of the American Revolution. And we're located in the heart of historic Philadelphia, 2 blocks away from Independence Hall, a block away from Carpenter's Hall. And we're anticipating in 2026 for the world to be coming to Philadelphia. And that might be through FIFA World Cup games that are being held in the city, through the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, through PGA golf events, but also to learn about and dive into the story of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary Era, which is why Philadelphia is a UNESCO World Heritage city. And so the Declaration's journey, this exhibit that we've been working on for about 6 years now, is speaking to the fact that our audiences are going to be major and international in 2026. At least that's what we're anticipating. And just as a note, since the museum opened in 2017, we've welcomed over 1.6 million visitors through our doors. And we're hoping to welcome 250,000 visitors through our doors in 2026, 250 for the 250th. So this exhibit opened on October 18th, 2025. So just over a month ago, and it will be open through the entirety of 2026 into the early days of 2027. But this is an exhibit, as I said, that explores the 250-year global impact. It's located in our 5,000 square foot special exhibit gallery, which you can see in these renderings that I put in here to give you a sense of the scope of this exhibit. This is sort of view into the rendering of the exhibit. But the way we've approached this story about the Declaration is not just to focus on 1776, but to encourage people to realize that 1776 was just the beginning of this story, the beginning of a story of a document that has changed the world. And the 4 sections that this exhibit breaks up into are arranged roughly chronologically. They start with the Declaration's first travels, and then it moves into the Declaration in the Age of Revolution. So that takes us into the last few years of the 18th century into the 19th century. A divided declaration, which explores the years surrounding the American Civil War, and then into the 20th and 21st centuries with the Declaration and the world. And to encourage visitors who are coming into the doors of the exhibition, to encourage visitors to realize that this is an exhibit that goes beyond 1776, we thought we needed to start with a sort of a bang, a showstopper, a poignant moment. And what we decided to do is to make a really interesting pairing or juxtaposition. That is pairing 2 different pieces of seating furniture from very different contexts that speak to the long impact of the Declaration of Independence and its words, the journey that the Declaration has gone on both physically and metaphorically. So on the left side of your screen here is a Windsor chair, but that chair is believed to be the chair that Thomas Jefferson used when drafting the Declaration of Independence here in Philadelphia in the early summer of 1776. It's on loan to the exhibit from the American Philosophical Society. On the right side of your screen is something that might not be as familiar or maybe something you've never seen before, but that is the steel prison bench from Martin Luther King Jr.'s prison cell in Birmingham, Alabama, where he was in prison in April of 1963 and wrote on scraps of newspaper what would become known as one of his most famous writings, and that's the Letter from Birmingham Jail, in which he, in April 1963, is responding to criticisms of his nonviolent protest that he was bringing to Birmingham to protest the policing and segregation in the city. And he was responding to say that those critics who are saying, cease and desist, stop what you're doing, what Martin Luther King is saying, if you're telling me that I'm doing radical things, you're calling Thomas Jefferson a radical. If you're telling me to stop, no, it is not my time to stop. This is a time to seize the moment and change the nation and encourage it to better adhere to its founding creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. references Jefferson and the Declaration as a justification for what he was doing in the American Civil Rights Movement. And so with these two pieces of seating furniture, two artifacts from very different moments, but are linked by the Declaration of Independence. And opening the exhibit with this is cluing into visitors that this exhibit has a large geographic scope and also a reach. And also it's going to be filled with an amazing collection of works of art, documents, and artifacts. Over 120 examples that are from 40 different lenders and 6 different countries. And so this is the opening moment, and this is as they appear on display in the exhibit with a backdrop of the Declaration of Independence behind them. But as visitors explore around the Jefferson chair and Martin Luther King bench, they'll enter the first section of the exhibit, the Declaration's First Travels. And this is the section of the exhibit where we explore the years after 1776 that speak to the Declaration's response, responses to the Declaration, how the Declaration's language is traveling both physically and metaphorically, and how the words of the Declaration are being used by various causes and people in the first few years following 1776. And we start with a moment that is a bit of a micro-historical look at an example of the Declaration's first travels, and one that connects to the neighborhood where the Museum of the American Revolution is. And that's the story of a Jewish merchant here in the city named Jonas Phillips, who was born in Germany, but was living in Philadelphia in 1776, right up on Market Street or High Street, as it was called then, about a block and a half away from where the museum is today. And Jonas Phillips, who's pictured on the left there in a portrait that dates to about 1803 by Charles Wilson Peale, he was able to get his hands on a copy of a Dunlap broadside of the Declaration of Independence. A Dunlap broadside is called that because these were the broadsides that were printed by John Dunlap the night of July 4th into the morning of July 5th, 1776. These broadsides, or poster-sized versions of the text of the Declaration of Independence, of which you see on screen here, were the first official printing of the Declaration of Independence, authorized by the Continental Congress. So imagine John Adams and Benjamin Franklin going over to John Dunlap's print shop in the evening of July 4th and bringing the manuscript drafts of the Declaration that had just been approved by Congress, and John Dunlap setting those into type on the printing press at his shop on Market Street. These were printed, a couple hundred copies were printed and distributed. They were meant to be sent to each of the newly declared states, to the Continental Army, and they even attempted to send them across the Atlantic. The Dunlap broadsides are very rare items today. There's about 25 that survive around the world. And Jonas Phillips was able to get a copy of a Dunlap broadside in July of 1776. And what did he do with it? He actually decided to mail it. He mailed it. He attempted to mail it to one of his merchant contacts, a man by the name of Gumpel Sampson. Wonderful name. He was a merchant working in Amsterdam at the time. So in Holland, in the Netherlands, Jonas Phillips had corresponded with him before, and he decided that he was going to send him this copy of the Declaration of Independence, as the Declaration was brand new news. And the letter that Jonas Phillips enclosed the Declaration in is on screen on the right side there. And you might not recognize that script there, but that's Judeo-German, essentially Yiddish. And Jonas Phillips wrote that letter in Judeo-German to Gumpel Sampson. And one of the lines he says, "Enclosed is a declaration of the whole country. How it will end, God only knows." He is reflecting upon this moment. Nobody knows what the Declaration is going to do, really do yet. He doesn't have the benefit of hindsight that we do. He doesn't know how this American Revolution is going to unfold. Will the United States win its independence? Will it be secured? And so Jonas Phillips mailed this declaration as news, and he sent it to Amsterdam by way of the Caribbean, specifically by way of Saint Eustatia, which was a Dutch colony at the time. And that mailing made it to Saint Eustatia, but as the mail aboard a ship tried to across the Atlantic, a British ship captured the ship that was carrying Jonas Phillips's letter and the Declaration, and the British seized this example of the Declaration of Independence. It ended up in the British National Archives, where it is still in their collection today, and it has returned to Philadelphia on loan, along with the letter that Jonas Phillips wrote, for the first time since July of 1776. So one of the things you can see, the physical travels of a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and how it never made it to its destination, but it is back in Philadelphia for the first time since 1776. So pretty a remarkable story there. So that's one of the ways we start this section. You can see these items on view here at the museum, and that pull a quote from Jonas Phillips's letter. But other things that we explore in this section of the exhibit are other examples of first printings of the Declaration of Independence. And this includes the very first newspaper printing of the Declaration. This is one of the ways the common people encounter the words of the Declaration for the very first time. That's shown on the right side of your screen there. That copy is from our collection, July 6, 1776. It's the Pennsylvania Evening Post, also printed on Market Street. The Declaration of Independence on the left side of your screen, though, might not be as familiar to you, but that is a broadside or poster printing of the Declaration, printed in July 1776 here in Philadelphia for the German reading population of the city, which was about a third of the city at the time. Philadelphia was a pretty diverse place even in the 18th century. And there were two German printing presses in the city. They had German newspapers, and the German printing firm, German-American printing firm of Steiner and Sist, printed a broadside version of the Declaration of Independence, of which there are only two examples that survive that are known about in the world. And this one is on loan to the museum from Gettysburg College and their archive. And it's a really neat to see visitors encounter this declaration at the museum and try and figure out what language it's in. But this is the first translation of the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people might guess that the Declaration was first translated into French, but the first language it was translated to in was actually German here in Philadelphia. And so it's a wonderful example. But this is giving you a sense of the first printings of the Declaration, how the word is traveling. We also have on view the first printing of the Declaration of Independence done by a woman. That's Mary Catherine Goddard's broadside, printed in January of 1777, when the Continental Congress fled Philadelphia and gathered and convened in Baltimore in the winter of 1777. Uh, we also explore how Americans in these early years following 1776 are immediately latching on to the language of the Declaration of Independence, particularly the second paragraph, the all men are created equal part of the Declaration. And we have a particular focus on how abolitionists, Black abolitionists especially, use this language to justify their efforts for abolition, for voting rights, for civil rights, and we explore some of their stories in this part of the exhibit. Notably, the leaders in Black Philadelphia, Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, who established the first independent Black churches in the city's history, as well as Revolutionary War veteran James Forten, who wrote and thought about the Declaration of Independence quite a bit, and a New Englander, Lemuel Haynes, who is accredited with authoring the first or earliest known abolitionist response to the Declaration of Independence. And that abolitionist response is called Liberty Further Extended, or Free Thoughts on the Illegality of Slave Keeping by Lemuel Haynes. He was a Massachusetts man who was serving in the militia during the early days of the Revolutionary War and aspired to be a clergyman, which he did eventually achieve. But he wrote this in the fall of 1776, this small manuscript here, which is from Harvard University's collection. And on the opening page, the title page of this manuscript, he quotes from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. You can see it there at the bottom of the manuscript. And he goes on to use that justification of equality as a reason for that statement of equality as a justification for abolition. It's an amazing document, only rediscovered in the past 50 years or so by historians, and it's on display in Philadelphia for the very first time. It was never published at the time, but it has since been published since its sort of rediscovery. And then on the right side there is something that Absalom Jones and Richard Allen in Philadelphia gathered together a group of Black Philadelphians in 1799 to petition the United States House of Representatives to change or repeal the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. And they justify their cause and submit this petition based on the rights statements of the Declaration of Independence. And that is coming from the National Archives and Records Administration. But these moments speak to the Declaration's first travels. We also explore how the Declaration is recognized by the Kingdom of France through the alliance between France and the United States in 1778. We explore how King George III reacted to the Declaration of Independence. And we also tell the story of the first nations to officially acknowledge the Declaration of Independence. And that comes from an unlikely source you might not expect, but it came from Native American nations, sovereign nations. It's the members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, the Wolastoqiyik, or also known as the Maliseet, and the Mi'kmaq people who still live in the Canadian Maritimes and upper portions of Maine, but they were in the midst of treaty negotiations with Massachusetts when the word of the Declaration of Independence reached Massachusetts in July of 1776. And that led to a treaty called the Treaty of Watertown, which we have a manuscript copy of in the exhibit. But moving into the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century, we explore the Declaration in the Age of Revolutions. And this is where the story really goes international. And one of the ways we explore that is the Declaration's influence on the French Revolution, notably the Marquis de Lafayette, who had served in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War here in America. This portion of the exhibit focuses on Lafayette's Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which he initially drafted in the early days of the French Revolution. And he drafted that alongside Thomas Jefferson, who was the United States ambassador to France at the time. So they collaborated on this document that was a more broad statement of the rights of people in France. And had become one of the most influential human rights statements in the history of the world, drawing inspiration from the Declaration of Independence, drawing some similar language from the Declaration. Lafayette's Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen is edited and is broadcast, and is one of the amazing sort of products of rights statements of the French Revolution. But very soon after, and as the French Revolution unfolds, another revolution is unfolding in the French Caribbean, particularly in Haiti. And this is when the first Declaration of Independence following the United States Declaration of Independence is issued. The Haitian Declaration of Independence of 1804. This is establishing the independent nation of Haiti, and this is a result of the Haitian Revolution and the effort to abolish slavery in Saint-Domingue, now the new nation of Haiti. This was something that was called for and authorized and partially written by Jean-Jacques Dessalines, whose a portrait appears on screen here. And in the exhibit, we have a manuscript copy of the Haitian Declaration of Independence on loan from Duke University from 1804, and a really amazing way to look at a different type of declaration of independence following the United States Declaration. This one begins with the words liberty or death, and it goes on to say that slavery is abolished, and Saint-Domingue is no more. It is now the independent nation of Haiti, of course, which still exists as an independent nation today, the first Black-led republic in the history of the world. But Jean-Jacques Dessalines' story, Lafayette's story, is one we are just a few of the stories we focus on that touch different parts of the globe, from Central Europe, as notably Poland and Hungary, with Tadeusz Kościuszko and Lajos Kossuth, who are revolutionaries against Russian rule and Habsburg rule in Central and Eastern Europe, issuing declarations of rights and independence there, down to Central America with Mexico's efforts for independence. One of the leaders of that was Vicente Guerrero, who's depicted on screen here. But this is also a time when South American revolutions are unfolding against the Spanish colonial empire, leading to declarations of independence in Chile and Venezuela, in what is now Argentina. And as Americans are hearing the news about these revolutions, the revolutionary generation, some of them are still alive. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams don't pass away until 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And as they're hearing about these South American revolutionaries, they're keenly interested in hearing about them and hearing the news. And Thomas Jefferson was keenly aware of this and thought about this a lot. And I'll get to that in a second. But we have some amazing artifacts that are in the exhibit that speak to these stories. On the left side of your screen is Vicente Guerrero's military uniform on loan from the Museo Nacional de Historia in Mexico City. This is their version of the Smithsonian. It's their National History Museum. This is the first time that Vicente Guerrero's uniform has ever left Mexico and come on display here in Philadelphia. And the book on your right side belonged to another Mexican independence leader named Jose Maria Morelos y Pavon, who was a priest turned general fighting for Mexican independence. But he was captured by Spanish forces and executed after being found guilty of treason. This is the book that he held with him when he was executed, and actually stained with his blood on the title page. These are treasures of Mexican independence that are now on display in Philadelphia for this exhibition. And it's been an honor to work with through the Mexican consulate here in Philadelphia and with the team at the Museo Nacional de Historia to bring these treasures to an American audience, to share the interconnectedness between the Mexican Declaration of Independence of 1821 and the United States Declaration of 1776. The object that has traveled the farthest to come to this exhibition is a printing press, all the way from Santiago, Chile, and the National Library there. This printing press has had a bit of a homecoming being included in this exhibit because back in 1811, this particular press was sent from New York City to Santiago to be the first printing press used in Santiago to print the very first newspaper in Chile's history. Now, Chile is an independent nation. This is a national monument of Chile and has traveled to this exhibition. And it is a wonderful artifact of how revolutionary ideas, Enlightenment thoughts, and even news from the United States is disseminated to audiences around the globe, notably in this case in Chile. And so this is an amazing artifact to encounter. It's displayed right next to the volume one, number one of the Aurora de Chile, the first newspaper that was printed in Chile on this press. And Thomas Jefferson, as I mentioned, is somebody who was keenly interested in following along on these South American revolutions. And in his last public letter, he reflected upon that. And he said, "May it be to the world," it being the Declaration, "may it be to the world what I believe it will be, to some part sooner, to others later, but finally to all, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains and to assume the blessings and security of self-government." Jefferson was seeing what he had written in 1776 as a potentially world-changing document. And that world-changing influence of this document was just beginning in the early 19th century. But the third section of the exhibit, we bring visitors back to the United States, to the eve of the American Civil War. And we focus on, in the first part of this section, the abolitionist movement, which was routinely using the concept of the Declaration and the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, notably the created equal portion, to justify their efforts and to show how the nation needed to strengthen its commitment to its founding ideals. And Frederick Douglass emerges in this era as the leading Black abolitionist. He was born enslaved and self-emancipates. And Frederick Douglass learns how to be a public speaker. He becomes this leading advocate for the end of slavery, something that he lived through the horrors of and thought a lot about. They also thought a lot about how Americans were celebrating the fact that revolutionary ideas were being spread abroad. However, the thought of keeping slaves in America, millions of people enslaved, how could the United States stand for that when they stood for, or at least they said they stood for, equality? So in Douglas's most famous speech, "What to the American Slave is Your 4th of July," which was delivered in Rochester, New York on July 5th, 1852, one of the lesser known portions of that speech, Douglass reflects upon that concept that millions of people are enslaved in the United States while Americans are celebrating revolutions abroad. And he says, "You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America." And this is a moment in which Douglass is sort of challenging the nation. Douglass himself thought highly of the Declaration of Independence. He thought highly of the founding generation. But what he saw in the United States was a need to make great change and a need to strengthen the nation's commitment and application of its founding ideals. And Abraham Lincoln is somebody who thought a lot about the Declaration of Independence as well. This is something that was growing in his political rhetoric as he's rising to the national political stage in the 1850s. And in 1854, he made a statement about how the nation should readopt the Declaration of Independence with its practices and policies and harmonize with it. And he would later use the Declaration of Independence in his most famous speech, the Gettysburg Address, when he references it 70 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln is using the Declaration of Independence as a unifying force and a force to bring great change to the United States by ending slavery. But at the same time, and the reason we call this section of the exhibit a divided declaration, the Confederacy is using the language and concepts of the Declaration of Independence to justify secession. So both sides of this American Civil War are using the Declaration of Independence to justify what they're doing. Jefferson Davis is routinely referencing the Declaration of Independence and the idea of the consent of the governed, that the states that have seceded from the Union did not consent to this government. They did not consent to have Lincoln as their president. They did not consent to a government that was seeking to abolish slavery. On the other side, Lincoln and the United States are using the Declaration of Independence to do things like justify the Emancipation Proclamation and slavery, and further adhere to the ideas of equality that eventually contribute to the Reconstruction Amendments. And at the same time, and in the years leading up to this Civil War, women are also declaring their rights in this effort and using the concept of a Declaration of Independence, but taking it to new places. And we focus on the story of Elizabeth Cady Stanton here, who is the author of the Declaration of Sentiments, an outgrowth of the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, in which Elizabeth Cady Stanton models this declaration on the Declaration of Independence and says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal," and goes on to further paraphrase the Declaration of Independence. Elizabeth Cady Stanton would continue her efforts into the late 19th century, early 20th century. This is a photograph of her as a young woman around the time of the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention. But later in her life, she is continuing her efforts to advocate for suffrage, women's suffrage, the right to vote. This is her desk that we have on display in the exhibit, on loan from Elizabeth Cady Stanton's great-great-granddaughter, Colleen Jenkins, who lives in Connecticut. She's graciously lent this to the exhibition. On this desk is where Elizabeth Cady Stanton was reflecting upon the women's rights movements, or reflecting upon the Seneca Falls Convention, but also what was next for the efforts for equal rights in the United States. One of the things we talk about too is the suffrage movement into the 20th century, and we have a large mural in the exhibit of this wonderful cover of Life magazine from 1915, which the illustration is called "Retouching an Old Masterpiece." It shows a suffragist carroting in and women into the Declaration of Independence as a ghost of a founding father looks on. It's a really poignant spot in the exhibit that is also a great spot to grab a selfie and take a photo in front of. But speaking to the fact that this was a long-standing effort to secure women the right to vote, which is finally secured in the 19th Amendment. And this is where we transition into the Declaration really going international again. This is bringing us into the 20th and later 21st centuries. The Declaration in the world seeks to share the fact that the United States Declaration of Independence was influential in declarations from Ireland to India, from Czechoslovakia to Korea, and we share some of those stories. Notably with Korea, which declares its independence from the Empire of Japan in 1919. And one of the reasons we are so pleased to share this story about Korean independence is because of its connection to Philadelphia. In the spring of 1919, a group of Koreans in Korea declare independence and issue a Declaration of Independence, partly modeled on the United States Declaration. But that obviously was not very welcomed by the Japanese occupiers of Korea, and what happens is the first independent Korean Congress is organized and held in Philadelphia. So representatives come from Korea. Some of them had been exiled to the United States, but they come to Philadelphia to further cement their independence movement's connection to 1776, to Philadelphia, to the United States Declaration of Independence. So this is actually a photograph of the Korean Congress delegates in Philadelphia. They had a parade at Independence Hall. They read aloud the United States Declaration of Independence. And one of the organizers of this was a man named Philip Jason, who was the first ever Korean American citizen. And he made his home in right outside of Philadelphia in Media, Pennsylvania, after having been exiled from Korea for his revolutionary efforts there. And there's a foundation called the Jason Memorial Foundation, which still exists today, that seeks to establish opportunities for medical care for Asian Americans in the Philadelphia region. Philip Jason was a physician, and so this is a mission that he cared deeply about. But he also was the primary organizer of the Korean Independence celebration in 1919 here in Philadelphia, 2 blocks away from where I'm sitting right now. We also feature India's efforts for independence. Just about a decade and a half later, in 1930, India declared its independence for the British Empire and issued a Declaration of Independence that was primarily written by Mahatma Gandhi. And the Indian Declaration of Independence begins with some familiar language. We believe that it is the inalienable of the Indian people, as of any other people, to have freedom and to enjoy the fruits of their toil and have the necessities of life, so that they have may have full opportunities of growth. This is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is something that Gandhi bakes into the Indian Declaration of Independence. And it was one thing to declare Indian independence and another thing to secure it, just like it was in the United States. It was not until 1947 that India secures its independence. And we have an artifact on display that connects to India's efforts for independence. This is called a charka. It's a portable spinning wheel, and it actually folds up. It kind of looks like a small briefcase when it is closed. But this was used to create khadi, which is cotton threads that were turned into cotton cloth, as a way to create homespun, essentially, to release the Indian people of a reliance on British manufactured goods, and make a statement, a political statement, through the goods that they consumed, the clothing that they wore. And this particular charka was given as a gift by Gandhi to one of his supporters, her name was Taraben Jasani, and she received this in 1928. And the letter that Gandhi wrote to Taraben to send this charka said that every household needed one, because this was a political statement, not just a handy tool, but a political statement of independence. And this charka was passed down to Taraben's daughter, who lives in Northern Virginia today. And she has lent it to the exhibit, the first time it's ever been publicly exhibited, this family treasure artifact. And Ila Jasani Good, Taraben Jasani's daughter, remembers sitting on Gandhi's lap when she was a little girl in India growing up there. And she's so honored to have this on display in this exhibit, and in this, how India's Declaration of Independence connects to the United States. So these are how some of these artifacts and documents appear as part of a timeline of independence movements into the 20th century. We also talk about civil rights movements in the 20th century. We bring visitors back to the story of Martin Luther King, and particularly the March on Washington, which just happened a few months after his imprisonment in Birmingham, Alabama. So in August of 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom gathers 250,000 people around the reflecting pool in front of the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. And Martin Luther King delivers his speech that becomes known as the I Have a Dream speech. And so as visitors come into this section of the exhibit, they approach a podium-style case that actually has a press advanced distribution copy of the speech. It's a typescript of the speech that was distributed to the press that morning. But famously, Martin Luther King diverted from the text of the speech to deliver the most famous part of the speech, the I Have a Dream part. That was spoken off the cuff, not from the script. But he's referencing the Declaration. He is energizing this crowd. And this display here at the museum with that press advance copy of the speech, it brings visitors to that moment of how the Declaration is on a new part of its journey, reaching new audiences and being part of one of the most famous speeches in American history. We also talk about how the Declaration of Independence is not only used in the Black Civil Rights Movement, but also in the Gay Civil Rights Movement, particularly in the 19th. And part of this story begins at outside Independence Hall with Annual Reminder Day, which is an annual silent protest or picket march that happened right outside Independence Hall, where Philadelphians were protesting people being fired from their workplace due to their sexual orientation. And people are carrying signs at these silent pickets referencing the Declaration of Independence. And a few years later, the Stonewall Uprising takes place. And we talk about that, how that was a flashpoint for the gay civil rights movement. And we have worked with Mark Stiegel, who is one of the organizers of the very first gay pride parades, to borrow artifacts from his collection, including the earliest iteration of the rainbow flag, which was designed by Gilbert Baker at the request of Harvey Milk, and also buttons that Mark wore as an activist and a leader of the pride parades that were established following Stonewall. One of the interesting things about Harvey Milk's story, too, out in California, is that he routinely referenced the Declaration of Independence in his speeches, notably in 1978 at the Gay Freedom Day celebrations in San Francisco. And we have an example of the text of one of his speeches in which he's annotating and referencing the Declaration of Independence. And so really neat thing there. But another part of the exhibit as we get towards the conclusion here is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was a outgrowth of the United Nations after the Second World War. This was issued in 1948, and Eleanor Roosevelt was the driving force behind the adoption of this greater statement of universal human rights, human rights statement for the world. And we have on loan from the FDR Presidential Library Eleanor Roosevelt's personal copy of the draft preamble of the Universal Declaration, in which she's annotating and making edits to it. But this is the most widely translated document in the history of the world. About 600 languages it's been translated into, and it still serves as sort of a mission of the United Nations. It's their call to action of what they're trying to uphold around the world. So amazing document that might not be well known, but it is universally important. And so the Declaration's journey, as this has given you a taste of, is showing that this is a journey that has touched the globe, has influenced various rights movements, but also how other rights movements have influenced how the United States has thought about its own founding era and founding document. But the thing is, the Declaration's journey is not finished. It continues. And that is up to us, 21st century people of today, that to protect rights, to seek and pursue happiness, to seek truth, to speak out when we witness injustice. This is part of the ongoing journey of the Declaration of Independence. And that's what is at the heart of the Declaration's journey. In the center of this exhibit is a wonderful theater presentation of 5 minutes long that encapsulates the spirit of the exhibit. And you're surrounded by facsimile reproductions of declarations of independence from around the world. But I encourage you to come to Philadelphia over the next 12 months or so to see this exhibition and become part of the Declaration's ongoing journey into the future. So thank you very much, and I'll be available for questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you. The exhibit sounds amazing. If anyone wants to enter in a question into the chat, we can go through those. But I will kick us off because, Matthew, I would love to hear, I'm thinking about it from a museum point of view, but I would love to hear you talk a little bit about what your role was for the exhibit.
Certainly. I served as project director. So that was overseeing the team that developed the exhibition. As I said, this has been a 6-year long process. It has taken a lot, as you can see, to get the materials here, determine what storylines we're going to feature, because there's so much that we had to leave on the cutting room floor here. There's so much more to talk about. Over 100 nations have issued declarations of independence, many of which are directly based on the United States Declaration. We had a wonderful scholarly advisory committee made up of distinguished historians of the Declaration of Independence. We did a lot of thinking. We did audience testing. We had to do fundraising for this, of course. This was the most ambitious special exhibit project the museum has ever done, and had the largest budget, and we hope has the most impact. But one of the things I ended up doing, especially for the past 2 years, was being an ambassador, an ambassador for the museum, traveling to different countries, traveling and meeting with consuls, and being engaged in cultural diplomacy. For example, when I went to Mexico City in July, it was to kind of cross the T's and dot the I's on securing loans from Mexico for this exhibition. And that involved meetings and face-to-face interactions to make sure that these treasures of Mexican independence were going to be properly cared for, were going to be properly respected, and assure the Museum of History in Mexico City that the Museum of the American Revolution was going to be a good temporary steward of these treasures and share them with the public, the visitors that come through. So that has been my job quite a bit over the past 2 years, especially, as being an ambassador in that way. It's been fun, a lot of fun.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got a couple questions. I have one person who's asking, do any of the museum's artifacts cover the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy, the influence they had on the founding fathers and mothers?
No, great question. The Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, is something we talk about every day here at the Museum of the American Revolution, notably through the story of the Oneida Indian Nation. But in relation to the Declaration of Independence, we also have some great outgrowths of the exhibit itself that speak to different themes that we can take a little deeper dive into. And we developed a great partnership with the Philadelphia PBS affiliate WHYY to create a video series that is being released every Wednesday for total weeks. We're at episode 5 just came out yesterday. That'll be turned into a 30-minute documentary. But one of the episodes is about that story, about the Haudenosaunee influence on the founders, ideas about democracy and representation and self-government. And so worth checking out. So there's a sort of like spin-off things related to the exhibit that take a little closer look at different aspects of it. Yeah, great question.
Excellent. And then we have somebody who's asking a great question.
Yeah.
One that I know that Andy and I have talked about a little bit. We'll probably talk about a little bit more, but were there any notable ideas or principles that were not included in the declaration after consideration or debate?
I mean, in the exhibit or in the actual declaration?
I think this question is more specifically about the declaration itself.
Gotcha.
but feel
Yeah,
free to take it in whatever direction you want to.
certainly. So were there ideas, just so I understand, were there ideas could sort of edited out or taken out of from date?
Sure, sure.
The number one is slavery,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That was we know that it was in the initial drafts, especially uh, it came across as one of the grievances that Jefferson had drafted targeting King George III as responsible for the transatlantic slave trade and its growth and impact on the Atlantic world. But that was removed through the editing process of the committee and the when the draft went for debate in the Continental Congress. So that is not included. That's the most
yeah,
notable one. Yeah.
yeah. We also talk a lot about, we found um, it doesn't lay out the rules for governance. This is an ideas document, right? Or a
Yeah.
breakup
It's
document,
Yep,
not the
it's not
Constitution.
establishing a government.
Yeah.
That the Continental Congress immediately tasks the states now with establishing their governments because it's United States. So it's multiple states. And
Yes.
state, we think of state as, Connecticut and New Jersey and right, but what state means is a country, not a nation, but a country, a political entity, right? And these are meant to be states coming together under a union. That union had to be secured, and that one of the ways they think of doing that is the Articles of Confederation. But each state has its own Republican form of government established through a state constitution, some of which are still in effect today from the Revolutionary era, notably Massachusetts' constitution. And so the Pennsylvania wrote a constitution. Connecticut adapted. I believe the Connecticut just readapted some of its colonial documents into a constitution. So yeah, so that declaration is a statement of principles of a new collection of United States, what they were founded upon, and justifying the separation.
Yeah,
Uh,
right. And maybe I would love to follow up on that too, because we mentioned grievances before. But so we're teaching at the museum, we're going around, we're teaching all of Ridgefield fifth and eighth graders. We're getting them to talk about the Declaration. And one of the things that we are talking about the most, and we've seen this is surprising to adults as well, is the majority of the document is just complaints, right? It's just those grievances.
yep.
That's where the focus is. That's where the energy is. That the lines that we remember are truly just like a little line in the preamble, a little line in the conclusion, but so much is grievances. So when you were creating this exhibit, I mean, obviously the rights narrative is a really compelling narrative,
Mhm.
right?
Sure. Yep.
But what made you focus mostly on that instead of the grievances?
Yeah, well, so we talk about the grievances quite a bit in that first section. We
Oh,
even have a video called Declaration. We behind the scenes we called it Declaration 101. It's essentially
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
90-second
yes,
summary of the layout and formatting of the
yeah,
Declaration, why it does what it did, why it's formatted the way it is, what it was trying to do. And that creates a new genre of writing, a Declaration of Independence, right? That was a new thing, right, for the world and creates a model. And so it starts with a statement of who we are, what we're talking about, when in the course of human events, right? But then statement of rights and principles, then grievances, so justifying separation, then statement of separation, right?
yeah,
Uh, and so we lay that out, but the uh, rights statements really blossom into the 19th century, into the 20th century.
yeah,
The grievances, those continue to be a model in which other nations are using, and we point some of that out too. We see grievances listed as a sort of it's the format, it's the template, I should say, for a declaration, and that those grievances carry on. Not every nation includes those grievances, and sometimes they don't list them out as sort of like almost like a bulleted list,
yeah,
but some nations do that.
yeah.
So,
We heard when we had our first community conversation, we talked through the grievances. I think one of the things that was most interesting about the conversations is folks felt that those were there was a lot of modern There are a lot of past present connections. Like a lot of people were, were you cherry picking these grievances, or did you, it's like, no, this is
Yep.
what they're saying, and there's a lot of connections to things
Right.
that we see in modern politics today.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a fascinating part of the Declaration that is not well known, but it should be
Yeah.
more well known, but more well understood. And that was one of the key parts of it, justifying why we're doing this. We're not just doing this because we feel like it. We're doing this because we have a long train of abuses, to quote
Yeah.
the document itself.
Yeah.
We've experienced that long train of abuses. So, yeah.
Showing our receipts. Absolutely. All
I
right.
had
Well, go ahead.
uh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know we're over, but I have a quick question. I wanted to thank you, Matthew, and I'm going to go on the Amtrak website after we're done and book my train ticket down to
Please
Philly.
do.
Um, just quickly, which object is your favorite that you had to, if you had to select one thing that spoke to you in this exhibit, which is your favorite?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I do have to say it's the charka. It's the portable spinning wheel
Hmm.
because of what that object means to the Giussani family. And that is fresh out of the attic in a way. It's never been exhibited before. It's brand new to this story, but it's sort of a something you wouldn't think would be in an exhibit like this, but it is, and it's directly connected to this story and the spirit of the Declaration's journey. And that artifact has gone on a journey itself, coming all the way connecting India to now Philadelphia. And so the family is so honored to have that on display, and just the way of getting in touch with the Giussani family was an interesting one, and an indirect route, but through just networks of people that made this connection happen, and it's been really rewarding, and they're wonderful people. So that kind of relationship building was so key to this, and I'm really proud of that.
Great, thank you.
And before we close, I did want to note that one of the other things that you'll get the chance to see at the Museum of the American Revolution is Jeremiah Keeler's sword. So great Ridgefield connection. We were gifted a Jeremiah Keeler sword that was given to him by the Marquis de Lafayette at the tail end of the Revolutionary War, prior to the siege of Yorktown. We have that on display along with a reproduction of the photograph of Jeremiah Keeler holding that sword, which is in the collection, the photographs in the collection of the Keeler Tavern Museum. So we're so thankful to collaborate on that display as well, and honored to display the sword. So you'll see that too.
Wonderful. Well, I'm taking notes. We had a suggestion in the chat for organizing a group trip to the museum. So
Sounds
we'll
great
see
to
what we
me.
can do. Yeah. Thank you so much, Matthew, for your time. This was fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And hopefully we see you all again soon.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.